Right, the podcast that uncovers the origin stories of some of the biggest names in sports, media, entertainment, and so much more. Nick Durst here along with Joe Calabrese and Joe. And what can we say about our guest today? He's such a great guy that we keep having him on the podcast.
Yeah, we've had a lot of repeat guests. So by our math, by our calculation, this is his third appearance, even though technically he's made an appearance here and there, but we're going to count it for purposes of three. So he's quickly moving up the all-time ranks when it comes to I'm right guests. He's near and dear to our heart. Before we started here, we made a point that we have to see him in person one day soon. But again, he's been a really great friend of the program. Been at ESPN for a really long time. We welcome back one of our favorites, Arda Öcal, to the show. Arda, you look great. You looked a
Yeah,
little overworked. The holidays are coming, so hopefully you and your family are doing well. But how are you?
I need a nap for sure. Definitely got to put my head on a pillow at some point. I got a vacation coming up, which I'm looking forward to. But whenever I get the invite to come on the show, Nick and Joe, you know that the answer is yes. And my goal, one of my New Year's resolutions for 2025 is to be the most attended guest. I want to be number one on the list. I'm going to work hard to get there. I know that Virk is on a every 100 episode
Yeah.
cadence, so I have a few shows to work with here to weasel my way in and be the first one to get the five-timer jacket. That's what we're hoping for here.
The jacket's very nice. It's in production. Nobody's reached the milestone yet, but we can't blame him, Joe. I mean, artists coming on, and as we're recording this, once again, I'm right, nominated for the best sports business podcast, also
That's
nominated for
correct.
the best Olympics podcast by the Sports Podcast Group. By the time this comes out, surely we have lost again because it's all about money, and we don't have the money behind us, and we'll lose probably to Pablo Torre on John Skipper and their podcast. But that's neither here or there. Just nice to have the nomination once again. Arda, you wake up in the morning. What's the first thing you're checking on your phone?
I need to detach from my phone. I was thinking about that the other day. I am extremely addicted to my phone. I actually bought myself a basket at home. So as soon as I get home, I put it in the basket and I put it out of sight so that I can be dialed in with the kids. I'm like, I need to detach as quickly as possible. So I actually have a rule that I try to wait 10 to 15 minutes before I check my phone when I wake up so that I don't immediately like that. I feel like that's one of the habits to break. You know what I mean? Wake up in the morning, don't immediately go for the phone.
Hmm.
And so, but once that time limit is up, I'm checking messages to see if I missed anything, if there are any fires that I have to put out, checking email, same reason, and then going on social media to see if there's any news that I've missed, usually going through the alerts. So here's the thing. I'm the type of person that has to have zero alerts. I can't stand people that have over 10,000. I don't understand
Crazy.
how you can have over 10,000 unread emails and it
Amazing,
just
right?
sits there and it stares at you and it taunts you. It
Yeah, it's
trolls you.
bad.
How on earth can you live with that? That would eat me up inside,
Oh,
guys.
you can't see it?
You got
Yeah,
zero, Joe? You got some.
I
You got
got
a
zero.
I
lot.
Well,
love
I
it.
got,
See?
yeah, it's a little blurry. I got two missed phone calls, one being, I think, from my uncle before, but as you can see, the mail app was kind of next to it. I don't have anything either.
No, I can't deal with that. Like the people
Yeah.
that have thousands upon thousands, I just don't. My wife is like that. And I'm like, you need a whole afternoon just to organize yourself.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
My wife's the same way. She's got like 10,000 unread emails. I'm like, why do you subscribe to all this junk? Just unsubscribe, delete it all. And
Yeah, a lot of it is like promo codes and like, subscriptions that you thought it would be cool at the time. Like I would love to know, like we should do like an informal poll at some point. Of all the newsletters that you sign up to, how often are you actually reading them after you sign up to them? That's what I would love to know.
good point. So on our 300 episode, you did make a little cameo. You sent a video for us for Canadian Tire for Adnan Virk, which was very nice and surprised him. But the big takeaway was that he said he had no interest in playing tennis with you because he thought you would dominate him and beat him badly. So, are you a good tennis player? Is he just thinking your athletic build is going to be too much competition for him? Were you surprised that Adnan wasn't in the mood to play tennis with you at any point? What's your takeaway there?
He's being nice. That's the Virk way. He's just an extremely kind human being. He's pumping my tires. He's
Hmm.
building me up. He's putting me over in wrestling terms,
Yes.
which he is very known to do. That's my actually, honestly, in listening to his interviews and his shows, like he's very good at that. Like he'll give a lot of credit to a lot of people that he works with or is friends with, or just people that have touched his life in some way. Like he's very, very good at that. I take that away from him as well. That's a takeaway of mine of him. Out talking on shows like this. Like I just love that about him. He's just very giving. He's very caring. And I try to pay that forward too. Like I will say this: most of my sports lately, maybe because I have such a long commute and it's like work and family, work and family. A lot of my sports are in VR these days. I box in VR a lot. I'm playing tennis in VR a lot. It's a lot of fun. Like I build up a sweat just boxing against other people in their homes. It's really it's wild. I never thought we'd get to this point, but it's a lot of fun.
No,
Well,
not at all.
like Bill Peter told you, when it's icy, it's dicey. So,
It's icy. It's dicey. No one cared more about the weather than Bill Pito. Like he would ask me every single day if there was even like half an inch of snow. He'd be like, did you get here okay? Was it icy on the roads? I know you got to commute. Like he was very, very concerned at all times. And it's funny because I ask people here. There's a lot of people that have been working at ESPN since the 80s and 90s. Like
mhm.
there are a lot of lifers,
Yeah.
quote unquote, here at ESPN, and they all have the same story. Like, yep, Bill just cared a lot about the weather, and he'd ask you. It was almost like it would take him half an hour or an hour just to make sure that everybody was okay driving in inclement weather.
The weather gets inclement for sure
Right.
out there in Connecticut. Now, the last time you were on a solo episode with us, we had you and Joe harp back to your improv days. Did a little
Mm.
skit, the DJ Pauly D thing. Now, DJ Pauly D, he loved it. He shared it all over his social media. He tweeted it. You probably don't remember this at all, but what do you think about the fact that DJ Pauly D was such a big fan of you and Joe's improv?
I think Joe carried that, so good on you, Joe. That was excellent.
That's right.
I
Thank
think
you.
it's hilarious. Yeah, yeah, I think it's hilarious. I sometimes sometimes you find diamonds in the rough, man. Like that's why you take swings, right? And so good on you, Joe. How does it feel, Joe, to know that you have a really good DJ Pauly D impression and it's a stamp of approval given to you by the man himself?
It's one of those things where every time I try to escape anything that's associated with the Jersey Shore, it kind of comes coming back. I can't really fully escape it, but I take great pride in it. I don't know if we mentioned this beforehand, but somebody that I used to work with in Secaucus was on the production team for the show. He was invited to Snooki's wedding way back when. He kind of fell out of touch with them. But by all impressions, every single thing that I hear about the ones who are still together and doing the Jersey Shore thing, even today, they're tight as ever. They're great people. Can't complain. So, Paulie D, great guy. Huge fan of the show. Huge fan of Arda. Huge fan of me.
Ain't that the truth,
Love it.
man?
Love it. So, speaking of Diamond in the Rough, let's talk about your career at ESPN, becoming a big deal. But now, over the course of the last few years, you've got to have a little more fun. Since the ESPN got the NHL coverage back, um, how much fun are you having there doing the studio shows, working with a lot of guys there who through the years, like they didn't really, have too much hockey to work on since it came back, so it's like you could see guys like Levy getting really, really excited about it and all that stuff. So how much fun is it there now working, especially with the NHL stuff?
Most fun of my career for sure. Like right now, my job at ESPN is very much a mix of NHL studio work. I get to do some reporting gigs now and then. I do some studio updates on our big broadcasts as well, which I'm very grateful for, and throw in a smattering of sports centers here and there. So that's a dream situation for me, and I couldn't be more thrilled and humbled and happy to be contributing in the way that I am. and it's year 4 now with the NHL and ESPN. So things are chugging along, and we're doing great, and I'm very happy. And it like the sometimes the best parts are like you mentioned Steve Levy, right? Like being able to watch him work and how he approaches segments and how he puts segments together. Like he's an absolute legend. Like he's a broadcast Hall of Famer, first ballot, right? And like he's so one my biggest takeaway with him, and especially like how he's working together with Mark Messier and PK Subban, like he's just very sharp and he's very quick-witted and he always has the right thing to say no matter what the situation is. And that's you can't really teach that. Like it's just innate, you know, like he's just he always has the perfect thing to say, and he always has the perfect way to tie a bow on something and transition to the next thing. Like he's just so smooth. Like it's just incredible. It's a credit for us to have him on the NHL and ESPN, and I know that he enjoys it in my conversations with him very much. So, like this is someone that's done Monday Night Football. This is someone that continues to call NFL games. This is a guy who's done north of thousands of sports centers.
Yeah.
He's an institution that yeah, the voice of the Bahamas Bowl. Exactly. The singular unofficial voice of the Bahamas Bowl. And don't you dare ever try to take that away from him. But it's just incredible.
With you and Steve Levy, this is like a real quote from Adnan Virk, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. He basically told me that you are a Steve Levy called away from anchoring the Stanley Cup playoffs and the Stanley Cup finals. So you ever think about that? Ever put that into perspective? Or do you think it would be John Buccigross that would get the call?
Bucci listen, both of them are legends at ESPN, and I'm very, very happy where I am. At the end of the day, like being in studio with both of them is a joy. Bucci is one of the most knowledgeable people about hockey I've ever met. He's told me like he wrote Keith Jones's book. He used to write like thousands of words a week on a hockey blog for ESPN. You could argue that he's the biggest advocate, probably is the biggest advocate for college hockey certainly in the United States, but probably period, right? Like he's the biggest advocate for college hockey, and he's just a very sharp hockey mind. And I'm lucky. Like we have a really good crew of people. We really do. Whether it's Ryan Callahan, Kevin Weeks, AJ Malesko, the people that I work with in studio primarily, I'm naming these names, right? PK and Mess. Like watching hockey with them, I end up smarter than I did at the start of the night because I always learn something from them, and it's awesome. It really, really, really is.
Well, you know what they say: do what you love. You never work a day in your life. So I want to talk about, we love the hockey talk. We'll get back to the hockey talk in a little bit. But you giving a TED talk. Now, I tend to like certain things that come up on this show periodically. I tend to be more spiritual than Nick. I like the motivational stuff. Nick's not a huge fan of the life coaches, or I think some of the people who kind of go up and do the TED Talks. So how did that happen? Who approached you? Was it something that you've always wanted to do? Obviously, with the nature of just being in broadcasting, you feel comfortable on camera and speaking in front of people. So how did that come about?
Yeah, Nick, go get a sandwich for this. All right, just go get some dinner, and then I'll
I
answer
would
this
watch.
question.
I would watch your TED Talk, and I've seen parts and bits of it, but I don't like the motivational life speakers that are scamming people out of money.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, obviously, I wasn't paid for my TED Talk, and nor am I, making money off of the TED Talk at all. It's more, I was asked by my alma mater, so I went to the University of Waterloo in Canada. I went there for a math degree of all things, and it's collecting dust on the wall. But I actually emceed their TED Talk series one year. I think it was maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And at the time, I really didn't have any subject in my head to do a TED Talk. Like I always thought they were cool. Like I'm a big TED Talk guy. I love the ones where I learn something. It doesn't have to be motivational, necessarily, Nick. It's more like, here's a lot of information that you should know, and here's my hypothesis. So I really like the concept of a TED Talk in that way. And so I always thought, hey, it would be really cool to do one. And last year, I was asked. They said, "Hey, we're our this is our track, or the sort of vibe that we're going with this year, and it's going to be a room full of students. Would you be willing to do a TED Talk at your alma mater?" I said, "Sure, why not? Say yes to everything." I will say that the biggest challenge wasn't necessarily like, by then I felt like maybe I could mold this into what it was, like finding it. Mine was a little inspirational, Nick. Apologies, but it was very like finding inspiration in things you don't normally find inspiration in. But I will say that the most challenging part was memorizing the speech. Like, I wrote the speech, it was 20 minutes long, and it was like, I don't memorize in my job, right? A broadcaster rarely memorizes that much. You're either reading off a prompter, or you're improvising, or you're ad-libbing. Like, you're not memorizing a 20-minute speech. To me, that was the toughest part. I actually spent like a whole month. I read this speech, I made it into a video on YouTube, and I just listened to it in the car, like driving. I have an hour and a half commute. I was listening to it back and forth because I was so nervous. That was the thing. I'm not nervous talking in front of people. I was nervous memorizing the speech because I thought, oh man, I'm going to screw this up. I'm not going to say this right. And it's going to, completely unravel, and I'm going to look like an idiot on stage. We didn't have a confidence monitor or a prompter. So like, I was doing this completely by memory. That was the scariest part. So like, I over prepared for the speech, which I guess is a good thing to do anyway, if you're going to do a TED Talk, right?
You nailed it. I mean, I think your days as Kyle Edwards came into play there, keeping you to memorization.
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
Let's talk some brief wrestling here. Curious your thoughts here.
Okay.
Will Raw being on Netflix give Netflix more subscribers, or will it give Raw less viewers?
I think it's going to, well, I mean, I think just by nature of the fact that it's behind a paywall on a subscription service could very well result in a lower number, like a lower viewership number in markets. So like, if Raw was, I don't know, 2.5 million, I don't know what the ratings are like today, but let's say it was like 2 million or 2.5 million on linear television, and suddenly it goes to Netflix, we may never get those numbers. And obviously the way that Nielsen calculates numbers is different than what might be reported by a streaming service, right? So we won't actually have an apples to apples comparison per se, but I do think that it will be a overall win-win relationship for Netflix and for WWE. I'm very curious what happens with the historical library when that deal is up, where that might go, and what else might happen with other parts of the WWE ecosystem. I think it was very smart to branch out Raw and SmackDown, similar to how it's been, right? Like, SmackDown was on Fox once upon a time, and Raw was on USA Network, and now you still have a linear property, and you have a streaming service property. So it's almost as if you're doing two things at the same time. I think WWE has the model for what the immediate future deals will be like, right? Like, every sporting rights will very much have a linear presence and a streaming presence. So I think WWE, we will look back on this as a foundational / positive outcome for particularly WWE and Netflix, but overall in this next iteration of their deal.
All right, I'm curious to see how it's going to work. Lots in the air, up in the air still, as far as how long it's going to be, how long the show is going to be. Will there be commercials? Can you start watching midway through but rewind to the beginning? So a lot of questions up in the air for me as of this recording date to see if I'm going to be able to tune in on a weekly basis, because I never watch live, obviously. I always got to skip the commercials, skip the matches and stuff like that. Last wrestling question here. Which WWE wrestler or on-air personality would you trust to babysit your kids for the weekend, and why?
Which WWE superstar would I trust to babysit
Yeah, or
my
on-air talent.
kids? And why? Well, on-air talent are pretty responsible.
Yeah, I think I'll
That's
roll
a
with
that's a
Byron
really good
Saxton.
question. Byron Saxton is a pretty reliable guy, and he's also always upbeat and happy. I remember once I was like in an awful mood at NXT. Like I just like had gotten bad news and I was just like in the dumps and I was sitting on top of the auditorium. Byron came up to me and he's like, "Hey man, like what's going on?" I talked to him a little bit and he's like, "Hey man, sometimes, you know, stuff happens and you just have to pop yourself. You just have to make yourself laugh." And then he proceeds to take a tumble down the stairs from the top all the way to the bottom, like intentionally taking this continuous bump as if it was like slapstick comedy, all the way down the auditorium. And it's full of people. It's like, I don't know, 80, 90 people, all wrestlers, all crew at NXT. And they're looking at Byron like, what the hell is this guy doing? So then he gets to the bottom and he stands up and he takes a bow and people just start clapping for no reason. And then he comes back up the stairs and he looks at me and he goes, "See?" And then like you can't help but laugh. Like he's just a funny guy. Like he just does things like that to cheer you up, you know? So yeah,
Yeah.
Byron's a great answer.
And he's criminally underrated. I mean, he's working 7 days a week, and he's really good at everything he does. Ring announcing is great, backstage interviewing, color commentary. He's a 5-tool player.
He absolutely is. And also there's something to be said about his positive attitude. Like he's somebody that people just want to be around and work with, even if he's not always the number one guy on the number one announced team. He always remains in the mix because of his work ethic. He is a talented guy. And also, he has a great attitude. People want to be around him. He makes people laugh. He's always upbeat and positive. He's a character guy, and you need your roster to have character guys like Byron for sure.
Quick last wrestling question for me, only because Joe Tessitore, I think, has done an outstanding job. And I went to Saturday night's main event, and
How
I
could
ended
you
up.
miss Joe in the first row with the I'm Right sweatshirt on right next to Pat McAfee?
I had a conversation with Pat. I know who he picks to win the national championship. We agreed to keep that quiet for now until he says that on the broadcast. But anyway, back to Tessitore because I think a lot of people knew he would just transition well. He's got the voice, the style, delivery. He's got that old school flair and feel to it. And I think it really came out Saturday night's main event. How do you think he's done so far? And have you ever do you have like a relationship with him? Like, because I know you're friends with a lot of these guys, Um, have you spoken to him since? Is it the same way like how Adnan was when he tried it, or what?
I don't know Joe. I've not met Joe. He's
Okay.
very good at his work. I admire him from afar. I think he has taken to it extremely well. He it's in the same way. I'm not saying he's the Kurt Angle of announcing, but in the same way that Kurt Angle was so quick to pick up professional wrestling, Joe Tessitore has been that quick to pick up wrestling announcing. Like he's but he's so talented anyway. Like he's so good. He brings so much energy to all of his calls. When you look back on it, it's almost as if the answer was staring us in the face all along with Joe. Like of course he would be a good pro wrestling announcer. Of course he would do well in WWE because he's so spirited and so animated and energetic in his college football calls and his boxing calls. So I'm not surprised at all. I think that the only surprise from wrestling fans is the fact that maybe they had never seen his work before because they don't watch college football, they don't watch his previous work, and they're like, wow, this guy's really, really good. But a lot of us knew that all along.
Yep, absolutely. Big game voice. Speaking of big personalities, let's talk about Gordon Ramsay. So if you were on a cooking show with Gordon Ramsay, right? But you were only allowed to shout WWE catchphrases, right? How do you think you would do?
I would do great up until he would kick me out of the kitchen. I would be like, what's this ingredient? It doesn't matter what it is. And he would just like haul me out of there, like with the quickness.
Very good, very good. What about telling him to say his prayers and eat his vitamins? Were you a Hogan guy or what?
Yeah. Say prayers, eat vitamins.
I
And
know
then I would
I
run
know
around.
you're Canadian and
Harder
Hogan's
to
an
make the
American
New Day
hero.
pancakes.
Yeah, like exactly. Like this lobster bisque is the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever
That's
will
it.
be.
There you go.
I'd be running around the kitchen and I would find like some sort of rope or something to shake violently. I would, yeah, absolutely. I would just be doing like Coco Beware was just at Saturday night's main event, so I'd be doing the
He
Birdman,
did the
in the
veteran
middle of a
spot right next to me was
yeah,
him and Greg the Hammer Valentine.
Joe, did you
I
talk to
yeah.
Greg the Hammer Valentine? You literally
I didn't have a conversation with him because they kind of rushed him in, rushed him out because they just wanted to put them on camera. But I was able to, tell him like, nice to meet you. I gave him a nice handshake and I let him do his thing.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so let's get back to the fun stuff, the hockey stuff. Nick and I were very upset. The Rangers came off another Eastern Conference Finals run, 2 and 3 years here, and now it looks like the wheels are falling off. But we're used to this because this happened from 91, 92 going into 94, right? So will the Rangers win the Stanley Cup next year for 25-26 after we project them to miss the playoffs this season?
Yeah, that's that the parallels are ridiculous. I would just our ESPN stats and information group had the exact same thing. It's like one year they win the President's Trophy, they lose to the eventual Stanley Cup champions.
Right.
Yeah, was it like 27 points in 21 games? It's similar in 93 to 2024. And then the next year they ended up winning the Stanley Cup in 94 and they could win the Stanley Cup next year if you believe in this history repeating itself scenario. So, yes, it's I mean, it's challenging for sure, especially with the previous success. Something needs to change. Obviously, Jacob Trouba has been traded, but that's not the only challenge that the Rangers are facing. It looks like a lot of their veteran stalwarts are getting less and less ice time. And, you only wonder what's happening behind closed doors in the conversations that are being had. You wonder, I mean, a lot of people are pointing to the personnel, the coach. When a team is winning, it's a band-aid for everything. When a team is losing, that's when fingers are started
Well, this
to
is
be
kind of the way
pointed.
Peter
And
Laviolette goes. He comes in, the team does an amazing in their first season, and that's all downhill.
right. And so, you got to wonder what this team is going to look like come the trade deadline and what they're going to look for and what they're going to try and pick up. Like, look, they have the best possible piece locked up long term. Igor Shesterkin has a new deal and a deserved one because he's, oftentimes the best goaltender in the league. And now you still have a lot of good pieces on that Rangers squad, but something needs to change. The team is losing, the vibe is off, the fans are noticing. Something has to change with the team.
So let me ask you one other question because you talk about history repeating itself. I think the Rangers are in an incredibly interesting spot because just a couple of years ago, I think the Florida Panthers were in this position. They had their identity and they leaned a certain way, right? And I would love to acquire Brady Tkachuk, right? As a Rangers fan, that guy is just a spectacular player, plays inside out, plays along the boards. There's a lot of elements to his game that the Rangers could use. That said, very difficult to trade for guys like that, especially in this league. But I think the Rangers are in a similar position to the Panthers where maybe there are one too many finesse style players. Maybe there are one too many players who play a certain way, right? Would you agree with that assessment coming from a fan?
I'd say that the funny thing with the Brady Tkachuk stuff is that it was obviously it's out there, but then the Senators have said no. We've had no conversations regarding Brady Tkachuk. He's staying put. These kind of rumors have been intermittent and have been coming up, not just this time, but previously with the Senators as well, and they remain steadfast that Brady Tkachuk is not on the trade block or there's been no conversations. Of course, he'd be a great addition to any team. He's a terrific player. He's got spirit. He's got heart. He's got talent. We're gonna see that on display with Team USA at Four Nations. So the Rangers would certainly benefit. It obviously a matter of what would go the other way and make something that's beneficial. And this is the other thing. Remember this: the Rangers made several trades at the deadline in '94 before they won the Stanley Cup, right? So they acquired a lot of different pieces. Stefan Matteau, Glenn Anderson.
Veterans.
There were a lot of pieces. Yeah, veteran. There was a lot of pieces that the Rangers dealt particularly at the deadline, to put them over the top to win that cup. So, I mean, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen?
Now you mentioned intermittent, so I want to ask you about your fasting during Ramadan and how that impacts you doing your job with the studio shows. Because obviously, when it's time for you to be able to eat, that's usually when you're on the air. I worked with Adnan during this, so as soon as you went to that first commercial break, he was
Hmm.
scarfing everything down. So just walk us through the difficulties of doing your job during Ramadan.
Yeah, especially if it's at a time when you are on the air, I'm on the air. I'll just have like a snack beside me, maybe a cookie or something, definitely some water. And during a commercial break, I'll just, quickly break fast. And uh, sometimes I'm lucky, maybe there's a little bit of a gap, so I'll have food ready, order something from the calf, whatever it is. But I try to not, I try to time it so I have something with me. But it's really more so like you get used to it by a week or so in. It's really the first couple days where it's jarring to your system because it's just something that you're not doing every day. So yeah, it really just is that. Get a bottle of water, get some sort of snack, something to at least get into your stomach while you wait for food, and you're fine.
Good point. Last hockey question for me, and then we'll move on here. My Coyotes left. There's
Mm.
a running joke where I with guys that I used to work with. I used to love watching that team. That said, they now play in Utah, and they are supported there. They have a great home atmosphere, home environment. But I think there were a lot of people who were expecting a more fun name than the Utah Hockey Club, right? Kind of resembled when the Redskins became Washington football team, whatever. Now they're the Commanders. So, do you think that the Utah Hockey Club will remain, or are there plans to eventually give this team its own little identity? Because Utah Yeti was very popular. That said, the Avalanche logo, the Colorado Avalanche, they used to have what was it, like Bigfoot or something? So,
Hmm.
I don't know if that necessarily flies and maybe too similar, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, it was the foot on the shoulder patch for the Avalanche for
Right.
sure. I mean, look, the owner Ryan Smith put out a poll and said, "What should our nickname be?" So they're clearly thinking. They have clearly thought about what the nickname for the team will be. With that said, when jerseys went on sale to the fans in Utah at the team store, they broke records or approached records, right? It was the highest revenue for a regular season day at a team store in NHL history, second only to the day that the Vegas Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup. It was very, very impressive how many people showed up and showed out, bought jerseys, etc. Maybe that sent a signal to the team and said, well, maybe we should stay with these jerseys a while. Maybe they might still have designs on changing the name. I'm okay with it. I don't mind either way. I'm used to Utah Hockey Club. I'm not upset at it. It doesn't bother me. I do want the team to have a mascot. I think that's important. So if in a hypothetical scenario, if they remain Utah Hockey Club and they have a Yeti as a mascot, I'm cool with that. If they decide to change their name to Utah Yetis or whatever might have won the poll or what they decide to change the name to, but they have a mascot of some sort, I'm okay with that too. I don't think I'm too upset either way. I'm happy that the community is supporting the team. They're paying money for jerseys and tickets. They have an owner that is committed to winning and committed to seeing the success of this team long term. And that's refreshing. So, full marks to Utah because so far things are going very, very well.
Well, it's always great when you can move a team to a place that's really going to support them with some crazy fans. That being said, we got to get hockey back in Quebec. So long overdue. So
Mm.
we'll see if the Nordiques ever make a return. Arda, I know obviously you're a huge video game guy. That was your entryway into ESPN. So if we're talking about any video game from all time, and you could replace the main character in that game with yourself, which character from what game would it be?
I mean, the correct answer is Super Mario Brothers, right? Like, I'd love to run around and jump on Goomba heads and have a flower and suddenly shoot fireballs. I mean, that sounds like the right answer, right?
Super
Yeah.
Arda. I like it.
That sounds like something that'd be fun. Yeah, exactly. With the iconic music rolling in my head. Yeah, that was the one immediate comes to mind. Being Link would be cool, I think.
Link
Right?
would be very, very
Yeah,
cool.
Link would be fun. Absolutely.
So
I don't
anyway,
know
let
if
me
I
ask you a
see. Here's
question.
the thing. Like, I don't know if I'd be wanting to walk around in Grand Theft Auto.
I
Like
was thinking
No.
that'd be
you and
so.
you replacing CJ in San Andreas would be great because you're just so polite. It would work perfect.
I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Those are some pretty gruesome deaths. Like, I don't know if I'd want to be
Wait,
in
so
that game. It
if
sounds very
you're
dangerous.
Mario, does that make Adnan Luigi?
I think I'd be Luigi in that situation. I'd be fine with
Okay,
that. I
okay,
don't mind
that
that. I think I'm
works.
taller. Am I
And
taller
me
than
too.
Adnan? Maybe a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, it's me, Luigi. Yeah, I could do that.
Okay, it's
So
great.
you've been on our show many times, so you know our signature questions are always the you know right moment. But when you get to the three plus, I have to reverse a little. So give me a time or place where someone has come to you for advice and you were kind of like talk them off a ledge maybe they were like I got this opportunity or something but I'm afraid I shouldn't pursue it and you were like listen this is going to be good for you you should go ahead and give it a shot and in the end you'll see that I'm right about this.
That happens a lot in our business. The thing is that you know how people always say you got to have thick skin to be in broadcasting. A lot of that is this is a rejection business. You're going to hear no 20 times as much as you hear yes. That's just the way that it is in broadcasting, in media, in anything television. There's the competition far outweighs the amount of jobs that are available. And every year, the amount of jobs are shrinking and the amount of people that want those jobs is growing, right? So it's very much a rejection based business. And so I get a lot of people, like I mentor quite a few people. People message me on social media, DM me, LinkedIn, whatever it is. And they ask a lot of questions like, how do I break through? How do I get a job here? What do I do? How do I make this work for myself? I've heard no in these jobs. Like, how do I succeed? And perseverance is the number one thing. Passion is the number one thing. Consistency is in that mix too. Like those are the three things that I would lump into a formula for success. It's not really a secret sauce kind of thing. Everyone has their own path to success, whether it's immediate. Some people work at ESPN and it was their first job out of college. People like me, I'm here after 20 years of volunteering and working in local television and getting a big break in Canadian television and moving around the country and doing different things like sports and weather and daytime talk shows and whatever it is, WWE, like a wide resume. I'm not saying this to gloat. I'm saying everyone's path is different. Like that's just the way that it is. And so when people ask me questions like that and they're like, what hope should I be holding on to? I tell them my story, but I also tell them it's persistence. It's being able to get past a no and understanding that 90% of the time that no is not you, Nick and Joe, you guys suck. No, that's not the case. It is we already had people in mind, or we lost the budget, or the job is no longer available, or we knew who we were hiring before we went through the hiring process. It was just a formality, or we were looking for something different. There's always usually some reason. And no usually means not right now. And that's the biggest thing that I tell people is even though you hear no now, that doesn't mean that you don't follow up with them in 6 months or in 4 months or a year and say, hey, here's what I've done since we last spoke. Maybe there's no job available, but I'm keeping in touch with you and I'm keeping myself on your radar.
Well, Joe, you could tell
You did a
Arda
TED
did a
Talk?
TED Talk.
Oh, we're thinking the same
Are you
exact
inspired,
thing.
Nick? Are you at least a little inspired? Are
This
you a
is
little
so good.
inspired, Nick, at all?
Well,
Just to
Not at all?
clarify, I have no issue with this inspirational stuff, but having worked for someone who did a lot of these speaking engagements and seeing the inner workings,
Okay.
things get a little, I don't know necessarily fraudulent, but pretty scammy. So that's why I
Okay.
don't like
Fair
these
enough.
some of these entrepreneurs and these life coaches. But I did see a lot of
Okay.
your TED talk, and it was very enjoyable.
Well, that's good. At least entertainment is what I was going for. So at least we got that going for us. That's good.
yes, you are a natural entertainer. And the thing with Nick and I is that it's like we were thinking the same thing. Just when you do this for so long, right? Like to piggyback off what you said, yeah, like Nick and I, it's not that we get no's, right? It's just, people don't really dedicate, I guess, their full time to helping us do what we do. But they encourage us, they love what we do. We get a lot of compliments, we get a lot of great compliments. So again, it's just a matter of keep going, just because you're redirected, redirection is protection, all those spiritual mantras that I'm sure you're well aware of. I have not watched your TED Talk. I'm going to be honest. So now I have homework to do. When the next time you come on for appearance number 4, by then I will have seen it and I'll give you my personal opinion about that. So that's my personal promise to you, Arda.
I appreciate that. And Nick, like I thrive more in practicality than general inspirational quotes. Like I've thought a lot recently about the idea of a mentor versus a sponsor. So I did this event at Disney World a couple months ago, and I was walking around with a Disney executive, and basically she brought forth this concept that there's a lot of people in life, not just whatever, pick a company, it doesn't matter, but a lot of people feel over mentored and under sponsored. And when I heard that, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought, man, that's exactly how I feel sometimes, or I have felt at different points in my career, because there's a clear difference between these two people, right?
Yes.
Both of them are very good to have, and both of them are very important to have at different points in your career. A mentor is not somebody that is advocating necessarily. It is someone giving you their counsel and advice based on their experiences to help inform your decisions and path. They're not the ones knocking on doors for you, saying nice things about you to the right people. They are there to absorb all the information you're giving to them and then giving you their perspective so it can help you along in your journey. That's what a mentor does. A sponsor might someone you be directly working with that's championing you, talking you up, pumping your tires to people in the company or to people that are hiring you in order for you to get a better look or a fair shake or whatever it may be. But those roles, though they can overlap, there is a Venn diagram where they meet in the middle somewhere. A lot of people conflate the two, and it's just fascinating how valuable the role, particularly the role of a sponsor, is in further, especially in this job, in this profession, So once you find those people, you surround yourself with people better than yourself and surround yourself with quality people. Like, you got to hold on to those people because they're very, very valuable to you.
I think that was the most enlightening media industry statement I've ever heard in my entire life. Nick can certainly agree to this.
I did it. Yes.
Yeah, no, but
I
it's the
did it.
truth.
Let's go.
Like people will direct you to mentors or people who, we have a friend who is like, if you want to do something, seek somebody who has already done that before or is in the position that you would like to be in. But that only goes a certain way. You need people like Paul Heyman in your corner who are willing to pump you up and advocate you and say, you know what, hire this guy for the job, hire Nick for the job. Look at the body of work. Look at all the independent sports events that he's covered. Look at how he works tirelessly. Look how he puts food on the table for him, his wife, and his 1-year-old son. Like that's ultimately what you need. And I'm so happy that you said that because you couldn't have said it any other better.
And let me say something quick about Paul Heyman. He is a perfect example of someone who meets the middle of that Venn diagram of mentor and sponsor. Paul Heyman has been a great, for lack of a better word, counsel to me in my career when I was navigating professional wrestling. For whatever reason, he saw something in me and he kept tabs with me. Oftentimes, I didn't even initiate the conversations. He would reach out to me. He'd send me a text. He'd send me an email and say, how are you doing? What are you working on? How are you improving your position? How are you getting one step closer to joining us in WWE? And not only that, he would go out of his way. If he caught some work that I did, he would publicly put me over, whether it was on social media or behind closed doors in WWE to the right people. Unbeknownst to me, when I got to WWE, I would hear from a lot of people that said, hey, Paul Heyman had a lot of nice things to say about you. Like, I can't tell you how important that was to my career and how often he would do this to people he believes in. Like, that is an example of somebody that is going to sponsoring you, champion you, going to bat for you. Like, and that's Paul Heyman. He's like one of the most charismatic people, one of the best talkers in the history of pro wrestling, dare say television. That's doing this for you. You know, like if I didn't have the Paul Heymans of the world, Roddy Piper was like that for me as well. Bret Hart was like that for me as well. Like I was very lucky in pro wrestling to have a lot of people that were talking me up to certain people to get me noticed or even get myself on a radar. But if I didn't have the Paul Heymans of the world advocating for me like that, who knows if I would have ever made it. It like I fully acknowledge that, you know, the impact that someone like Paul Heyman has had in my career, particularly in professional wrestling, when I was seeking that job, is immeasurable. So I owe him a great token of thanks and plenty of Korean barbecue.
We acknowledge Paul Heyman and Arda on behalf of Nick and I. You know, I think that again we haven't seen you in person yet, and that's something that we have to do definitely sometime next year after the holiday season. But we're very happy that you come on and do this with us. You know, I think in terms of demeanor, the type of personality like Nick and I have, like the interests, I think there's a lot of overlap between you and us. So we're very happy to consider you a friend. We do consider you a mentor. Hopefully, you know, one day we get to work together in even greater capacity. So we appreciate your time. You know how this does. We do this at the end here, but I do have one final last question, and I need to know your opinion on this. Do you truly think Adnan Virk is done having children? Do you think the shop is truly closed for good?
No, actually, I believe he's got four, right?
Yeah.
Does he have four?
Yes.
I think four more is on the table. I think he's going to double. He's gonna build it. He's actually going to build at the very least. Adnan is going to have a starting lineup for a hockey team, so
Okay.
he's going to get to six.
Okay.
We need a goalie,
Okay.
and then possibly an entire team. You know, when it's all said and done, we could have a whole team just of Verks, which would
Dan
be a
Burke Hockey
formidable
Club.
team.
That's right.
Without a shadow of a doubt. They add, yes, Verk HC. And I'll be the mascot. It'll just be me wearing a suit running around in section 112, waving an Adnan Virk flag and handing out Adnan Virk foam fingers. I love it. I'm in.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Arda, again, like I said, we appreciate your time. You know how this works. You know, a lot of really great motivational stuff. But if there's anything else you would like to share or promote for yourself before the holiday season, again, we wish you and your family the best. And let's get together sometime next year. It'd be great.
That would be great. Yeah, no, nothing to promote. Just happy to be on the show. Happy to come back at some point. Continued success, guys. I know you guys do this as a labor of love, and it's a lot of fun to listen to. I know that you've had Virk on a few times. I think you had Michael Eaves on recently. Like you guys get some really good guests.
Adam Schefter.
Yeah, so
we get
it's
them
been
all.
fun to listen to. Yeah, I will say this.
There is one of your colleagues is playing really hard to get now. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
I don't know if we should throw under the bus, but we did talk about him earlier. So
okay, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but I will say that the guest lineups have been continuously impressive. So. But nevertheless, it's been fun. I will happily come back on, and yeah, may the force be with both of you.
Well, we appreciate that, Arda, and I already have the graphic made to promote this podcast, and it is you in your blue makeup from your Star Wars day at ESPN.
Love it. Career highlight. Are you kidding me? I got Thrawn on SportsCenter, Thrawn Center. Come on. Who else could say they've done that? Huh? 40 years of SportsCenter, and it took 40 years for us to get blue face paint and red contact
How long did it
lenses
take for hair and makeup?
A Star Wars theme set. A fair bit. It took a while.
I'm not getting it off.
We were in that chair for a while. Shout out to Courtney, who did a fantastic job. But we basically turned Studio X into the Death Star. It was outstanding. It was one of the most surreal moments of my entire career, and I'm happy that we pulled it off.
Nobody better than you for that assignment, and you nailed it. Arda, this has been fun as always. We thank you for your time. That's going to do it here for this episode of You Know I'm Right for our special guest, Arda, my co-host, Joe. I'm Nick, and this has been You Know I'm Right.